And it's such an interesting, like, and obviously incredibly dark and harrowing time to kind of pull from, filled with so much fear. Hi, I'm Jamie Campbell Bower, and this is my Artist Recommends for Rolling Stone UK. The book that I would recommend is a book, it's a collection of poems by Brian Patton called Love Poems. And it was one of the first poetry books like outside of given literature at school in class that I found. And it's always a work that I'll go back to for inspiration. It has been with me through thick and thin, and the imagery that's used in it is so powerful and so beautiful, and often pervasive in my own solitary style of writing as well. The album I would recommend, and this is purely because it was the first time I discovered this artist, would be Nick Cave's Murder Ballads. A friend of mine at school introduced me to that when I was like 16, and it was around the same time that we were discovering sort of writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and things like that. So it really like holds a very like romantic and special place in my heart. But it was my introduction to Nick Cave, and I love Nick Cave, and it was through songs like Stagger Lee that I was really like, oh my gosh, the darkness in here, and yeah, it's just the tone of it and everything. So that would be the album I would recommend. I bought it for my dad for Christmas. I mean, I said this when I was very young, but like all of Tim Burton's work was wildly inspirational for me growing up. I loved his world building. You know, Edward Scissorhands is an incredible film, and that I think it was one of those first movies that really I felt like I was introduced to the idea of the outsider. And I feel like through so much art, it's often nice when you're seen, and I felt very seen by someone like Tim Burton. So any of Tim's work, and then obviously I was fortunate enough to work with him, but then like obviously more recently, creators like Robert Eggers, you know, The Witch. I think Eggers made The Witch when he was 32 or 31, which is outrageously young to be making something that powerful. And it's funny, like as I've sort of progressed and gone through a journey of my own of like storytelling and finding what world I want to build for me, I would often go back to like that kind of Puritan space that Eggers was putting out there in the same way that The Crucible did as well. And it's such an interesting, like, and obviously incredibly dark and harrowing time to kind of pull from, filled with so much fear. And it's a really interesting space to create something out of. And I can't and don't use it. I just tried to. And now I'm like, oh, well, that exists and it belongs to somebody else. I just am interested in it in a weird way. An artist or a movement I would recommend to people is abstract expressionism. I know it can be pretty passé and pretty dull, but like I really got into it in my late 20s, early 30s, and discovered artists like Franz Klein, Conrad Machiavelli. You know, of course, you have your usual suspects, your Rothkos and so on and so forth. But for me, Franz Klein was always really interesting, and it might have come from when I was a kid. I was really into Jackson Pollock, and I got like a Pollock print put on my wall when I was young. But for me, the simplicity of like the monochrome, you know, usage of black and white just splashed on a canvas, in its like description, it sounds so simple. But then when you're stood in front of works like that, particularly on like a huge scale, which Franz Klein often worked on, it's incredibly emotive to see. That is really powerful for me. And again, you know, it's like I find these artists that I love and I'm like, oh, I want to recreate it. And I try to recreate it and I can't. Like, I'm like, it exists and I need to do me. I need to be me and do what I do. But yeah, abstract expressionism is, I find, just fascinating because it's like an immediate feeling. I have many places that are very special to me. I grew up in the countryside. We left London when I was like 9 and moved down south. I was so fortunate to grow up in a space that was just so green, I think. And so being out in nature is always important to me, or being by the sea. I try and get out to the west of England as much as possible. down to places like Cornwall. I'm not telling you where, but I'm a surfer, so those spaces for me are like hallowed ground almost. Like I can go and like I can feel one way, get into the water, surf, and come out and feel like a totally different person and just feel like infinitely better. So anywhere by the sea. Influence-wise, I've been talking about this with somebody at work recently because we share the same town where we grew up. And in our town, there was a local youth theatre that was run by two people, and I'm not gonna call them out by name, but I think that opportunity to be part of like my local youth theatre when I was super young really gave me the confidence to do what it is that I do now, and a limited understanding of what this is. But I was also so encouraged by those two people as well to step forward, to be myself. And I found a great community in that space. So my recommendation would be anybody who wants to be an actor or do something is like start within your community, start there. There's so much to be had, and that's where you'll fall in love, and that's where you'll find your community.